So in this video, I want to show you guys how I'm going to design my deer bedding area on my 18-acre property. So one of the first things that I've done now that I'm out here is I'm just assessing what kind of timber that I have. This is an important step in the process because you want to be able to kind of tailor your bedding area for what it doesn't have already. Now in this spot here, I've got a lot of balsams and they have been shading things out like crazy. In fact, if you look around here right now behind me, and hardly any sunshine is hitting the forest floor and we don't have any leaf cover. It's good in terms of thermal cover, but it's taking away from a lot of the vegetation that could be here for the deer to eat on. So I need to free up some of those balsams, get that cleaned up a lot. Some aspen, as well as some maples, red maples. I do maybe have a few sugar maples in here, but mostly red maples. And then I also have just a couple ash in here. Now, I do have a habitat plan for what I want my bedding area to look like. We're gonna actually step back inside for a few minutes. So you're gonna take a look at that. All right, so let's take a look at this bedding area. I have this outlined in white right here. And this close one here, this is going to be mostly designated for the does. Something right up tight next to my main big food plot that's right here. And if you notice this, I've got this whole area circled in white. What's circled in white is actually going to be the trees that I leave. And that's going to be mostly conifers. Deer love edge, and they love to be on the edge of conifers. And I want to utilize that to my own advantage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this strip right here where there's some good thermal cover that's protecting wind coming from the north. And as that wind is coming from the north and that thermal cover is protecting it, they can still get that southern exposure with the sun. Now you'll also notice here that I've got a lot of points coming off of this. I've done a lot of scouting over the years and I've found numerous sheds right on that southern edge, and especially right on those little points and fingers of conifers. It just told me that that's something that I need to replicate on my property, is these little peninsulas and points of timber that stick out, and it gives them good thermal cover that they can kind of shield in, and it traps in the heat, but then they're getting almost a full day of sunlight at the same time. Now in this little area in between the food plot here and my thermal cover barrier, I am going to convert that into an area where I do a mixture of hinge cutting and clear cutting. So what I'm going to do first of all is go through and just cut the trees that I don't want in there to kind of free up some of that canopy, and then I'm going to come in and hinge cut later on. Now if you look at this orange area, this is an ash swamp. This all filters down and pinches down into this little tight chute that goes through the whole property here. And it gets pretty wet in that section. But here's the interesting thing. The timber is fairly open because I have got a lot of old ash trees. In fact, I cut one of them down and it was 110 years old. So I've got a lot of canopy in that area. So there's very little understory there except for a lot of grass that grows up in the summer. But during the fall, it's wide open. But right now, I don't mind that too much. I actually like when there's a little diversity where you've got this little thin strip, this little pocket right here that's fairly open, and then it's thick and nasty on both sides. It's almost like a little chute that's going to draw the deer all the way through that. And I've noticed a lot of times that I get a lot of rubs right around in here as those deer are coming through this area. The other thing that I like about that too is that a lot of these bucks during the rut are going to cruise through this little strip right here, and it's going to be thick and nasty here and thick and nasty there, and this is going to be the best location where they can cut through all of the doe trails and all the doe bedding area and get a good scent of everything. And I got a nice strategic stand right there and a nice strategic stand right there as well. Another thing that I want to mention about these conifers is that they're also a visual barrier and a little bit of a sound dampening barrier here. So if I'm walking in on my perimeter trail here, right like this, that's not that far away on 18 acres. That's only maybe 100 yards at most away from where these deer are going to be bedding. But that little visual barrier there is going to hopefully help me be able to slip in and out of the woods
without them noticing. The cool part also with this is that with that open ash swamp here, this creates a really nice edge right along this spot right here where I'm going to be keeping some of those conifers. So I would even anticipate that some of the deer might bed on the back side of this at times. And it's also just a good edge of travel right along that outside backside edge. Now moving a little bit deeper in, we have the second tier bedding area. In this area here, I'm doing the exact same thing, trying to create these conifer strips and lines and this little barrier right there where it's giving them all the thermal cover that they need, but all the sunlight. But you know, here's the cool part when you really think about this. If everything is thick in here, all grown up and nasty, you could have deer bedding on this point, you could have deer bedding on this point, you could have them bedding on this point, this point, this point. You could go through all these different points here, right like this, and you could stack in 10 or more deer and not even know that there's any other deer in the woods. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do is give this property a bigger feel to it almost, where it's like the deer kind of have these little safety zones, where these little pockets where they can be in seclusion, but yet they're not that far away from all the other deer. Now this middle tier is going to be designed mostly for does as well, but probably be a few bucks that may bed in there as well. Now if you look back on this pipeline here, this pipeline in the summer is very grassy, really tall grass, chest high or taller. So you got really, really good cover. A lot of deer actually bed out in that grass during the summer. But once the snow comes, it usually mats it down, and there's not much there for the deer. They'll cross the pipeline a lot. They'll walk along it, but they don't bed out on it per se. So I want to see if I can keep some of that yearly pattern to stay the same there. So I'm going to create a little bedding area right here. And this little bedding area has got some more points, again. I don't know for sure if it will attract bucks, but I'm just trying to stack as many opportunities as I can into one location so that I can have a lot of the similar patterns of movement. I want all these deer coming through the property, filtering through and heading out to my food source, or I want them coming over to this food source, feeding for a little bit, then working their way over to this one, then working to this one, and then all the way out to my main destination food source. Now obviously I'm not going to hold all of the deer. And a lot of these deer are going to bed way off the property. A lot of these bucks don't even like to be close to where a lot of the does are. They're going to be a half mile away. But the nice part is with something like this, if I've got good consistent browse, good food, good cover all the time, I've got nice thermal cover, I've got everything that a deer would ever need. I've got water on my property coming through this drainage that's right over here along the side. I've also got a little pond out in my food plot. It supplies everything that they need. So they don't have to go look very far, and I'm going to hold does every single year consistently on this property, and it's going to be a magnet for bucks. And in fact, it's already been working. I'm only partly through my plan with this property, and already in the first couple years here, I started with 10 bucks, and this last year I had 27 different bucks on camera on this property, 18 acres. That's pretty impressive. I'm really pleased with that, and I think that as I continue to make improvements to this property, it's going to advance the age structure even more. That's the biggest challenge that I'm running into right now, is I'm attracting a lot of bucks, but I'm having a very hard time getting them to be advanced to the next age class because of all of the hunting pressure that's around me. I'm going to be doing a video on that, how I turned my property from a 10 buck property into a 27 buck property. I'm also going to be working on a video that's going to talk about how I did some hinge cutting on this property and some of my thoughts. Some observations and things that I've learned, good and bad, about hinge cutting, and what has worked and what hasn't worked on my property in the big woods of northern Wisconsin. Lastly, if you want to get your hands on some Stillwater apparel, make sure that you check out the link that I got right above you here.